Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are talking a little bit more about Bhakti Yoga. A lot of you know that I weave Bhakti Yoga into a lot of the astrology content I make, and occasionally I do a crossover video. In these crossover videos, what I'm doing is giving you a chance to look a little bit deeper at Bhakti Yoga and all the Bhakti Yoga content that I create, which I produce on a private YouTube channel, which you can access through my website. So if you wanted to right now, you could go check it out at my website, nightlightastrology.com, click on the Bhakti tab, and if you join, it's free. You can get a whole ton of just exclusively Bhakti Yoga content. Occasionally, what I try to do is create a video for people who watch my astrology content, who often contact me because they're interested in learning more about the spiritual aspects of the astrology that I talk about. And so I'll do a video to try and give people a sense of what Bhakti Yoga is about, and some bridge content to help you possibly make your way over to the Bhakti side of my work on my website. So that's what we're doing today. And I'm very excited because Kat's with me. You guys all know Kat. She helps me aggregate your questions. I did a recent Bhakti crossover video, and we got a lot of questions back from all of you. So we're doing a little Q&A today. And I'm also very happy to have two of my friends and people that I consider mentors and teachers in my life, Loka and Vidarbha. And they are here with us as longtime veterans of Bhakti Yoga to help us field your questions. So we got a whole crew here with us today. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Loka. And thank you, Vidarbha, for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much
for having us.
Absolutely. So, Kat, you've actually gathered a whole ton of questions that people have. We've tried to narrow them down into some of the most basic questions that people might have when they're first hearing about Bhakti Yoga. So I'll let you take it away and guide us into the questions for today.
Great. Looking forward to it. So, thank you both for being here. I think the first question that we've had is just very simply, what is Bhakti Yoga? Is there a goal to this path or this faith path? How would you describe it to somebody who hasn't really heard much about it?
So as we all know, the word yoga is a Sanskrit word, and I think it's made its way into the English dictionary, and it means to connect, to link up, right? And there are so many different ways of connecting or linking that is described in the ancient Bhakti wisdom text. Some of them being that we can connect through the medium of the intelligence, which is known as Jnana Yoga. We can connect through the medium of our work, and that is Karma Yoga. And then, of course, the very famous, we see yoga studios and, using all kinds of asanas. That is actually called Dhyana Yoga. Now, Bhakti Yoga is bringing or integrating all of these different forms of yoga and connecting through the medium of the heart. So Bhakti means love, it means gratitude. So it's literally the yoga of love and gratitude. And, just by connecting through the medium of the heart, one can actually, one's mind is actually automatically controlled. That's kind of described as one of the goals of the yoga practice, is to actually control the mind and the senses. However, the goal of bhakti is actually bhakti itself. So the goal of love is love. And so what we are really trying to tap into is this unlimited reservoir of love within our heart that is actually considered to be the nature of the spiritual self. And so once we start practicing this, we tap into that great reservoir, and then we can feel that love and be able to share that love with everything and everyone that is part and parcel of the Supreme Divine.
Okay,
beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering about you two personally. What first attracted you to this path? Has this been lifelong, or is it more recent?
Well, we came in touch with Bhakti 25 years ago. I was looking for questions to answers about what is life, what is the purpose of life, and deeper questions. And I was feeling an emptiness. And when I came across this path of Bhakti, it really satisfied a lot of different needs in me, intellectual, spiritual, as well as meeting people who are really high quality people who were willing to share and willing to love. And that's what really attracted me to Bhakti. It satisfied like a overall need in many different areas.
Yeah. Do you want me to also?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Since I remember since I was very young, I had a lot of questions about what was life, and and why, and what would bring me happiness. And I remember distinctly going through different phases of my life where whatever I desired, I would find it, but then 2 or 3 months into it, I would start feeling this emptiness, and it's like, really, this is it, and so that this kind of went on, and I didn't know that what I was really looking for was this connection, this love that my heart was really hankering for. So actually, both of us, we found this process. We got married and we came to America, and that's how, right here in Washington, D.C. area, we came across some wonderful teachers and the books, and that's how we started 25 years ago.
Yeah, we found a philosophy that was very coherent and consistent and logically sound. That was one of my key needs, and as well as people who were out of this world. So it kind of a marriage of both the heart and the mind for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like you were both seeking something and tried a lot of different things, but this was ultimately the path that felt most fulfilling.
Yes,
that is true.
That is absolutely true. I mean, I could, like Loka, for example, he was trying to find answers to these questions through the medium of science. And so that left him, it got him to a place where, you were feeling kind of empty, like what's next? And I was looking for it from a different perspective, just trying to fulfill my desires, whether it was through career or whether it was through this or that, and then just finding that nothing could really satisfy my heart. And so when we embarked on this path, it's an ongoing journey, but it has been very deeply satisfying for us.
Acyuta, did you want to add anything to that? Anything about your experience with it?
Well, I came to Bhakti through, I would say, like being someone who was philosophically oriented. Astrology falls into, I think, my experience of it anyways, that it falls a little bit into the jnana yoga territory, which is we're learning how to use the mind, for example, to recognize the difference between spirit and matter. We're learning to we're using the mind when we study astrology to understand the science of karma and things like that. And, but it was the heart level of practice. So I grew up in the Christian church, and prayer and communion with the divine in the heart was really important. And although I had kind of drifted from Christianity and philosophically found my home in ancient mysticism from both the East and the West, but was really looking to incorporate the mind-body connection. Yoga came into my life, physical asana, things like that. But it still felt like something was missing, that deep level heart connection. And so when Bhakti came in, just as Loka and Vidarbha was saying, it really kind of put it all together, where there was, my mind is included. The philosophy is really incredible, from all these different wisdom texts that are so important for the students of Bhakti to read, like the Bhagavad Gita. And then, it connects so seamlessly into astrology and these other areas, but it also makes my everyday practice of Bhakti is so much in the heart. And that's where I find the grounding and the real happiness for everything else. And it seems to, it cross-pollinates. It's like the more that I've focused on the heart through Bhakti, the more that I feel my mind is clear and I understand the philosophy that I'm studying in these other areas of life a lot better too. So it's really beautiful in that way.
Yeah. So it sounds like, so Acyuta, you came from a faith path before, and Vidarbha, Loka, I don't know if you did, but I guess one question that has come through is, for people who haven't grown up with any real form of religion at all, and are they're feeling drawn to Bhakti, they're learning a little bit more, maybe through Acyuta's videos, but maybe they're feeling a bit overwhelmed, maybe a bit out of their depth, because this isn't something that they haven't grown up with any kind of faith. I'm just wondering if you have any tips, or if you come across people in that situation very much.
It's interesting. I grew up in India, but actually my parents, didn't really engage in any kind of, religious practice when I was growing up. So my experience of spirituality, religion was really through the Catholic school that I went to. And I was very drawn to Catholicism from very early on. In fact, when I was in 4th grade, I approached the nuns and I said, can I be can I be like one of you? And you have to wait, grow up, and then you can make that decision. So, we all have different, ways that we all come into. I personally think that there is great merit when we approach it with a freshness and no prior experience. I think it allows us to, in fact, that's one of the goals of the Bhakti process, is to always be in this sort of beginner's mind and like approach it with fresh eyes, right? Without prior conditioning or baggage. And so there could be some feelings of like, yeah, this is so much knowledge and so much information. But as long as we are open and we take baby steps, I think those tiny baby steps, and expect that no matter what background we come from, like I come from India, it was as new for me, and and for you too, sometimes there's a lot of undoing. Like yesterday in our Bhagavad Gita session, one of the, we were just talking about reflection, and there was one lady, and she said, what I have been learning in the last 3 months is how much I have to let go, my previous learning. So
yeah, for me as well. I mean, although I grew up in a traditional Hindu family, but not getting any meaningful answers, I became like a hardcore atheist. And I for like 7-10 years, I was like arguing against the existence of God. And I went through that phase. And I felt that that was kind of my cleansing. I had to let go of everything I knew. And I basically, when I started in Bhakti, I started from like ground zero. And that really helped me to like approach Bhakti. So somebody who doesn't have any background, I feel that it's a good thing, because Bhakti itself is very nurturing. And then from very first step, it kind of includes you. And then you never feel that you're not included. And that's how we felt when we joined Bhakti. We felt very included right from it's very encouraging, very inspiring. So you never feel that you have a handicap if you don't have a background.
Yeah, thank you. It makes me think of Acyuta, you teaching ancient astrology, and often you say it can help if you don't have a pre-existing, knowledge about astrology when you start, studying it.
There is actually a story on those lines where there was this great violin teacher. And so when a student would approach him, so a student approached him and he said, yeah, I've taken many lessons and I have all these years of experience. So he said, all right, $200 an hour for you. And this other student came and said, well, I've never even touched a violin. He said, so it's like, okay, $100 per hour for you. So somebody asked, like, what's the difference? He said, well, for the first guy, I have to spend a lot of time on teaching him, a lot of the stuff that he thinks he knows. So,
and we see that in our like teachings over the last 25 years, people who come with a very strong traditional upbringing or background, especially from India, we have to spend a lot of time kind of explaining the same concepts again and again, because they have to go through.
There's some attachment there, right? There's some attachment to our own, old conditioning. So, yeah.
How would you guys describe two things that I guess I have questions about? One is like, how would you describe the difference between, say, just kind of Orthodox Hindu culture and Bhakti, and how would you describe the differences? The way that I've experienced it, I'll just say this as a little qualifying remark, just as someone who didn't grow up in India and then going to India and kind of hearing stories from people like yourselves who grew up there but weren't necessarily exposed to Bhakti. It's a bit like if you grow up going to Catholic church on Sundays, but it's you go because it's a cultural thing to do, but you may not go because your heart's really invested in the actual faith. That I've heard people kind of compare it to that before. But do you think that's a good comparison? How would you describe it?
What do you mean when you say Orthodox? Like you're just talking about the cultural aspect?
Yeah, Orthodox maybe not the right word. I just mean how would you describe the difference between, say, like, kind of growing up in a Hindu culture versus diving into Bhakti?
Yeah, well, there are two aspects to it. One is that there is some familiarity, with different aspects, but you don't really know how they all come together.
I guess there's a lot of in traditional Hindu family, when you're growing up, you're exposed to a lot of rituals and like different worships, which are very geared towards like temporary immediate benefit. That's what I saw my mother and grandmother doing, this puja or that worship, but it was all geared towards what physical or material benefit we'll get out of it. And any deeper questioning, there was no like explanation for that, why we're doing this. We have been just doing it for generations. And that's what led me to, and then when you see people kind of engaging in kind of misleading you or cheating you in different ways, then that's what led me to kind of reject all of that, not find a satisfying answer. But there is a strand of bhakti as well. As when I reflect back, I see that in traditional Hindu families, there is a strand of bhakti, but it's kind of misguided and it's not kind of properly understood. So it gets mixed up with doing things for just yourself, for getting some material benefit.
Yeah, for me, like, I think there was not as much exposure. I mean, there was some exposure in terms of just the society, right? Or, extended family and stuff. It left some imprints on the heart, but nothing that really drew, like I was drawn to deeper questions, and I was frustrated because I would ask these questions and then there weren't, enough people who were even, thinking or even had answers, right? So I think it kind of laid the seed for deeper, inquiry. So I would not, there is merit to it, but it did not, it did not really take us where we wanted to go. And that's where, these books really kind of, like the first time we picked up the Bhagavad Gita, we were like, oh my God, they're talking about the exact same questions we've been asking, our entire lives. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up question that I have, and then Kat, I'll let you jump back in because I know we have more questions to go too. But, in astrology, sometimes it's very similar where someone comes in for a reading and look at their chart and you see a Saturn transit or something like that. And oftentimes the question is, well, what do I do to get the best result out of that? Or, maybe there's a gemstone, or maybe there's a ritual, or, something that I can do. And, in ancient astrology, there was definitely an element of astrological practice that might have, like Ayurveda or something, where there might be remedial things that you're supposed to do to counteract the effect of a planet or something like that. But if we look at the roots of what ancient astrologers were saying, philosophically, many of them were saying that actually the planets do their thing in this material world, and all the energies of the material world are always moving along, and we're, one of the core goals is not so much to try to manipulate those energies to get something, because in that way you're kind of playing poker with the gods, but actually what they said was it's important to be able to reflect and sort of separate yourself from the karma. The astrology helps you recognize that's the karma, and that's just the material energy flowing along, and who are you in relation to it? You're a spirit soul. And so I wonder if that's a similar insight when you were talking about, that in a sense, because I understand bhakti is really about not saying, life is full of its ups and downs and all of its difficulties. But what we're trying to do in bhakti every day is sort of go beyond our entanglement in all of the ups and downs of our circumstances and connect in the heart to the divine that's permeating everything. And that's how we actually find satisfaction or happiness. Is that an accurate way of explaining?
Beautiful. That's beautiful the way you put it. And that's exactly right. Because growing up, that was one of the things that put off, like one of the reasons why my parents, for example, were not practicing any sort of religion, is because they saw this version of religiosity, right? And it was very off-putting for them, because they just felt like, just like what you described, it felt like you're just manipulating, right? Doing this worship, doing this ritual. And so when we finally came, and started, understanding bhakti, what attracted us was just this mood of selfless love, right? Not expecting anything, and just being and being able to find that deep place of acceptance, rather than trying to fight and manipulate and trying to, somehow overcome, rather a place of peace and acceptance. Yeah, that's a big difference. Very nice.
The Hindu kind of traditional Hindus bringing is kind of, I found that it was very entangling into the material world. And although there were some rituals and things like that, but they didn't really help me become free from that anxiety and in peace for deeper answers. Whereas the path of bhakti was right from the very onset, helped me to recognize that, this material world is separate from my real needs, and then I need to disentangle myself from this.
I have one last follow-up question, and I promise, Kat, I'll stop. My last follow-up question is, one thing that was confusing to me and a lot of people who watch this channel, I think, are really into philosophy. So I think that this question will be really interesting to people. When I first started getting into yoga philosophy, it seemed like the Vedas themselves had a significant amount of time dedicated to, worship and pujas and rituals specifically designed to, propitiate certain gods, get certain results, avoid certain results, etc. And I'm wondering, how does Bhakti contextualize the presence of that aspect of Vedic history or Vedic tradition? Because I think that for me, hearing the explanation as to, why that's there, why that exists, or why something like Ayurveda or astrology exists at all within the context of Bhakti, I think is really, really interesting. Could you guys speak to that?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. And as we see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Vedascha sarve ahameva vedyo vedanta krit veda videva chaham, that I am the compiler of the Vedas, the knower of the Vedas, and the goal of the Vedas. So Krishna has cast a very wide net when he says Vedas, because he understands that people are at different levels, especially people who are struggling in this material world or have desires to enjoy this material world. The goal is to kind of attract them to under the canopy of the Vedas. That way they can start accepting Vedas as a veritable resource, and start following what's within the Vedas. And then they get material results by propitiating these different gods and things like that. And as a result, their faith develops in the Vedas. But in all the worships and rituals given in the Vedas, there's also included within it is the worship of the Supreme. So it's like a candy pill, which is like a medicine coated with some sugar so that the child will take it. And that's how the Vedas are designed. So a person will progress from one step to the next. And the concepts of like reincarnation, next life, and all those are built into those kind of rituals and worships. The person already starts developing their philosophy as well, and their attraction for the Supreme. As a result, they're designed in such a way that the person will start developing a sense of detachment. Once they go through those rituals, they're purifying as well. So they are materially rewarding. At the same time, they build a person's faith, they build a person's knowledge, and they're also purifying. So the person also starts developing a sense of detachment.
Actually, this has been one of the things that has always fascinated me so much. Like even in my study of Ayurveda, I was so intrigued by the fact that here I was studying Ayurveda, but right off, as we started talking about what is disease and what is health, I saw like, oh my God, this is all second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, right? So, just how, the two kind of come together, that no matter what science you approach or what field you approach, how, this knowledge of the self and karma and reincarnation, all of these things are so deeply embedded. But for a person who has not gotten into that yet, they may not completely understand it, but they'll get it. Just like you're describing, right? Just that the idea of afterlife, even in astrology, the idea of karma is there, so you start thinking like, oh yeah, I'm doing all this, but then what is this? It takes you to the next level of inquiry. And at the same time, it does not disregard people who are not there yet, so it's all right. We're not there yet. You can connect at this level and still make spiritual progress. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so helpful, because I often tell people, when it comes to astrology, my students, for example, I'll say that, in the beginning, when you're studying astrology, there's a lot of interest in our own birth charts, in what's going to happen in the future. And we pay a lot of attention to what the planets are doing and how it's going to impact me. But in time, even the ancient astrologers in the West, who I think had really deep philosophical connections with India and yoga as well, but they were saying, look, what this does for you in time is it acts as a contemplative device. You're not so much concerned about the future anymore, as much as being able to see these karmic patterns playing out in life allows you to reflect upon God, allows you to see God's hand in the unfolding of the material energies and how they're playing out. And so the astrologer might have clientele that are very invested in outcomes. And one of the ancient Greek manuscripts, it was classically called apotelismatics, which meant the study of outcomes. So you have a clientele that might be, more or less worried about their crops or disease or their family or weddings or whatever the case might be. And astrologers would not condemn people for having those interests, but the astrologer themselves, so sometimes called like a priest of the stars or something like that, their relationship to astrology was more contemplative. They're looking at these as the patterns and the controlling intelligence of God, and that ends up being a way of connecting the heart and mind to God in the sky. And that's really, as astrology students, that's where our studies are supposed to take us in time. But then in the meantime, we don't condemn or look down upon people for using astrology as a way of understanding what the karmic weather is like in the meantime, that it's like the candy pill. If we spend enough time with it, it leads us there.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And and that's the beauty, right, of the whole thing. It takes you, leads you on.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm done now. Kat, we have more questions, I know.
Thank you. So yeah, we've been talking about like kind of broader, more philosophical concepts here, and I'm kind of just wondering about the practical daily steps, the lifestyle. How are we building this love, this bhakti, especially when we're beginning, and again we're maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed. What does that look like?
Well, like in the beginning step and then also the ending step, the most important step that helps us is chanting. In our practice, we chant the mantra, the Hare Krishna mantra. And that mantra is the mantra of bhakti. It's the mantra of love. It's the mantra of service. And by chanting that mantra really helps me to understand my relationship with God, who I am and who God is. And every day it really fills me up with this inspiration that I want to do this more. And every single day I want to do it. And it's very easy to do because I don't have to prepare anything. I don't have to set up anything in my house. All I have to do is find a quiet space and time and just do it. Even for 5 minutes, it doesn't have to be long. Even if I do it for a few minutes, it really helps me.
Yeah, the whole process of Bhakti Yoga can actually be summarized as the yoga of sound. And sound is very powerful because it is described in the ancient Vedanta that sound is the beginning, and sound has a profound impact on our consciousness. In fact, it moves our consciousness. So the kind of sound that we associate with determines the quality of our consciousness. So there is an aphorism in the Vedanta which says anavriti shabdat, which means liberation through sound. And so when we start associating or spending time with spiritual sound, and specifically in our tradition, we chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And once we start doing that, what that does, that it removes this layer of dust that is on our consciousness that prevents us from seeing who we are. And so gradually we can actually see this within ourselves, that our consciousness will become more clear and there'll be greater clarity. And so it's a very simple process. It's something, it's very portable. One can be walking and one can chant, one can be at home, one can be in whatever situation, and one can simply chant. And then the second step that I think leads us to go deeper in this is actually finding a community. Bhakti is all about community. It's, unlike many other yoga practices, which may have a very strong core of retiring into a cave and being, in complete solitude. Bhakti is actually about coming together. And that's when we make the most progress, when the bhakti within a practitioner's heart gets reflected in the other person's heart as well. So connecting, making connections, bhakti connections like that really helps us develop this attraction for being able to chant the mantra and go deeper in our meditation practices.
So like one of the simplest things that a person can do, even if they can't chant, even if they can't do anything, is to just hang out with others who are interested in bhakti. And if they can just do that, and then bhakti is kind of...
bhakti flows.
Yeah, you absorb bhakti.
Would you say that it's safe to say that just listening to a talk like this, where people are hanging out, talking about bhakti, even in a general way, is actually one of the practices of bhakti?
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. That's actually one of the Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that it's one of the highest practices of bhakti. And it's what I find beautiful is that even a beginner can engage in the highest practices of bhakti just by hanging out and just using their ears. That's all one has to do.
In fact, there's a whole trajectory of bhakti. And the first is, of course, just a little bit of openness within the heart, right? And that's called Shraddha, which means where we place our heart. And then, it's basically just the first item of bhakti is hearing, just coming together and just allowing ourselves to hear, the sound vibration. And right from there, all the other things just come about as a natural consequence of that hearing process. So hearing is actually the most important thing that gets us started.
And all the way from the beginning to the end.
Yeah.
Okay, really helpful.
Even when we're chanting too, I think that one of the things that my Guru Dev, who Loka and Vidarbha know very well, Vaisheshika Maharaj, he will often say that even when we're chanting, one of the things that can help you to chant is to think about hearing the mantra that you're actually chanting. So when you chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, one of the easiest ways to get the deepest benefit is to just make sure that you're really hearing yourself chant every mantra.
Absolutely. Yeah. That is the core practice, right? That every time the mind goes away, right, then we just bring it back to hearing the sound. And that's very simple. And Prabhupada would say that even a child can do this, right? So it's very easy.
It's very encouraging. So in terms of, when we are actually practicing and we're somewhere along this path, what kind of challenges have you encountered? And, just maybe help prepare us for any challenges that we might encounter.
So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that the mind can be our greatest enemy or it can be our best friend, right? And so we live with this mind, which is sometimes compared to a drunken monkey. Sometimes it's in yoga, they say it's a monkey, it's a restless monkey. And I've even heard like somebody say, call it a drunken monkey. How crazy is that, right? So, that's our greatest challenge, is overcoming, right? Krishna says that also in the Bhagavad Gita, that this material energy is very difficult to overcome. So, the greatest manifestation of this energy is right here with us. And it is constantly, taking us places, right? That's how, we find ourselves where we are, because the mind is very, very powerful. So one of the greatest challenges that a practitioner encounters on this path of bhakti is that as soon as you start the process, you become aware that, oh, I have a mind. And the mind is very restless. And Arjuna actually says that the mind is very restless and difficult to control. However, with practice, right, with steady practice, daily practice, consistent practice, that what one finds is that the mind gradually starts to become more and more attracted to the sound, and then becomes pacified, and in fact not just gets pacified but starts to experience a higher taste, and then it no longer is like a restless child or a restless monkey.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying, I was thinking that no matter who you are, no matter what path you're practicing, you always have to deal with these challenges of the mind, like envy and anger and illusion and lust, and all these things are part of our conditioned mind. And with bhakti, you come face to face with them, and not only face to face with them, but what I find is very encouraging. I find bhakti to be very encouraging, especially when we read like the wisdom text, like the Bhagavatam, which is filled with stories of people who started on bhakti or practicing bhakti, but then they get consumed by one of these enemies of the mind, and they have like kind of a fall down, in the sense that they kind of get overtaken by these enemies, and how they stand up on their feet and then again overcome these enemies is very, very encouraging. And that gives me a lot of encouragement that yes, there are challenges I'm going to face, because I have been carrying these enemies within me for so many lifetimes. But now is my chance to kind of befriend these enemies and transform these enemies into an advantageous position for me. So the obstacles in bhakti, I find they are also, they become like a stepping stone to higher advancement and higher knowledge.
So it's not just like a linear path. It's okay to have fall downs, as you say, as long as we kind of keep getting back up.
Yeah, the example that is used, which I find so beautiful, is seeing how a child learns how to walk, right? Before a child can walk, and I remember seeing our son, who's now in college, seeing him, he would pick himself up, take 2 steps, and then find himself, but he would just pick himself up again, and then in a few days or whatever, he was walking, and then of course running. So bhakti is a little like that we have to expect that the mind is going to, give us some resistance, when we first start. But if we simply can stay with it and not give up, not get discouraged, and just continue on, then great results and great discoveries, waits us.
Yeah,
if we can just stay with this.
The falling down or not being a perfect practitioner is already built into the process. So it is expected, and then there are measures one can take to again come up again, and it's encouraged that it's expected that you will go through that phase.
Acyuta, did you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, totally. That's just a few things were coming up into my mind that really have encouraged me, because obviously I'm a parent, and I've got a busy astrology practice and so forth. And one thing that has been encouraging to me was, and I can't remember who I first heard say this, but it's in one of the wisdom texts, I believe, maybe like the Nectar of Devotion, which is another famous bhakti text. But it was that, and I'm going to kind of universalize this, but when you start encountering people who are singing about God, dancing about God, chanting about God, talking about God, hanging out together because they're interested in the philosophy of God, that's like such a good sign. It's kind of like saying, those are the first rays of light coming up over the horizon before the sun rises. And that, we should be so encouraged that we can contextualize our difficulties or our challenges in bhakti alongside of the fact that the sun is rising right now, because these are the signs that the sun is rising. And if the sun is the actual appearance of God in the heart, actually coming into personal contact with God, that the soul is being illuminated, that the first sign of that awakening coming into our life is that we take more interest at all, or that people are showing up in our lives, that we're listening to these kinds of talks and having thoughts and questions and struggles included. All of it is like the first little rays of light coming up. And if we can keep that in mind, then we can contextualize those challenges in the space of what progress we must have made already as a spirit soul to be, at this place where this great, this great awakening is already starting to take place. That when someone said that to me, and I don't remember where I first heard that, maybe you guys can tell me, Loka and Vidarpa, but that for me was like, oh, that's so relieving. And it makes me feel so trusting that those challenges are a part of the light starting to dawn.
It's beautiful. Yeah, actually, Vaisheshika Prabhu says it so beautifully. He says that the first time I heard it from him, I was just so happy. He says the distance that we have to go is much shorter than the distance that we have already come.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And I loved it because I said, so even our initial, stirring of the heart and our inquiry, or the initial stages of bhakti, it's a very advanced level, and we can feel so encouraged, so.
It could be very easy for us to be like, if you're listening to this talk, it's like you could have chosen to watch Desperate Housewives, or like you could have chosen something else and you didn't. And like, I think that if you're struggling with something spiritually, to remember that, I heard a quote the other day. Someone said, struggling to make money is hard. Struggling to do this is hard. All these different things that we can struggle with, and it's going to be an element of difficulty in struggling with them. Well, better to choose struggling with spiritual life,
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's funny that you say that. This was me, kind of giddy, when I found this process, and I remember sitting with our spiritual teacher, Mukunda Goswami, and I was so new to the whole process, right? And he was sitting there, he made exactly this comment. He said, it's better to struggle with Krishna than to struggle, and I was thinking, what struggle is he talking about? To me, it all seemed,
Right. That's cool.
So in terms of one struggle that I was just kind of thinking about is other people in our lives who maybe aren't really, ready for this kind of knowledge and information, and the practice itself. How do we kind of, I don't know, keep this up without maybe being like brought back by other people around us?
Very nice. Yeah. It takes, again, if we have a community, then it helps us. So there are two aspects to it. One is our own strength, because it's hard because, everyone around us is not in that space. So how do we find our own strength to continue? And for that, again, connecting in some way, with some community really, really helps to give us that strength. And then the second thing is our own interaction with them, which I feel that the more mature we can be, in the sense that we have to let people be in the space that they are in, and just I think people get inspired by not what we say necessarily, but who we, how we are getting transformed. So it's our own internal transformation that really, really, inspires people and impacts them. I've seen that in our own life, that in the beginning, there might be some tendency to want to tell everybody and see if they can also, join us. And that's good. But I find that family members might sometimes feel, they may not share our enthusiasm, or they may not be in that same space. So I think our that's when it helps us, because as practitioners, it forces us to go deeper in our own practices and really, make the transformation by the change in our own qualities, right? It's what inspires people when they see that we're actually developing those qualities, those spiritual qualities.
I guess just being patient.
Yeah.
Which is hard to do in the beginning, because when you're starting out, your own faith is kind of weak, and you want to protect it by being like maybe exerting your practices or your beliefs in a more vocal way. But I guess what we have seen over the years is being flexible, being patient with others who may not be interested in it, or who may even put a resistance to what you're doing. Really understanding and being a good listener, and being patient, I think,
and also compassionate, right?
Being compassionate, yeah.
Because different people come from different places, and they may have their own time, just like we have our own journey. They have their own journey. And I have found this very amazing. For the last 25 years, my own parents were not particularly interested. And in fact, it was hard because, because of their own negative experience with religion or whatever, they were not happy that I was joining, whatever, or I was practicing something that, that didn't make them comfortable. But over the years, they have really, my mother herself has taken up the practices now. So it's taken some time, but, just by seeing a steady example.
And I guess putting yourself in their shoes, I think if that is one thing that we can do, is whenever we see any resistance or whatever, putting ourselves in that person's shoes really lets go of the steam that we might have inside, and makes it more easy to deal with that situation.
I've noticed over time that my wife and I, many people who watch this channel know, we had a yoga studio for quite some time, and we even dealt with this question just in terms of the impact that people who start taking up a yoga practice often have the same question. I feel this peace, I'm changing, I'm starting to value a more relaxed environment in my life. And maybe I don't want to go out to the bars as much, or I don't want to go to the clubs, or, people have all sorts of things in their lives that they may naturally not be as attracted to when they take up yoga on, any kind of yoga or any kind of spiritual path in general. And I feel like, the two things that I guess I've learned over time, and one is that there may be certain things that we have to let go of, but I don't think we always need to make a statement in how we let go of something. So for example, there's some things that aren't in my life, and some people that aren't as much in my life anymore, but there was never a moment where I said, okay, look, I can't talk to you, or look, I don't do this. Or I feel like the nice thing about bhakti is that it softens the heart so much that over time, those things just naturally start to fade away in terms of our interest. And then we don't have to take some kind of, militant stance, which often then turns people off more than says, hey, I noticed that you're not around anymore doing this or that. And you just say, I've just been more absorbed in this. And when people hear that shift and that it's been subtle and gentle and there's not a feeling of rejection included with it, that's so much more inviting for people to take interest in what you're doing and how you're changing. So that's something that we always told our yoga students over time. And then, oh, sorry, go ahead, Mataji.
No, go ahead.
So, and then the second thing is that there are more, I've found that there are also more difficult things that we do sometimes have to take a stand about, but we can still take them in gentle ways. For example, when I first got into Bhakti, I was admittedly more of a sportsaholic, and I really liked, in particular, football. And although it still plays a role in my life because I haven't been able to fully let go of it yet, and that's like just the truth. So, but I was playing fantasy football with some old friends of mine, really dear people, really good people, and but this game was consuming a lot of my headspace, and I had a really hard time letting go of it. And I had to, at one point, kind of have a sit down with myself and say, look, yeah, I have to let this go now. And it was difficult for me to tell the guys in the group, like, I can't play this anymore because it's taking up a lot of my time and so forth. And so I think there's some choices that are more difficult where you do have to kind of take a little bit more of a stand. But even then, I thought to myself, I can't take a stand in a way that, that was a hard choice for me, but I couldn't take a stand that was hurtful of my friends. And then, that was like going to be off-putting to them. And then secondly, I wasn't ready to give up football entirely yet. And I think that's another important thing, is that Bhakti really isn't a path of renunciation. It's a path of getting more and more absorbed into love and into connecting the soul to God's love. But as we do so, there will be, gradual stages of letting go of things that distract us from that. But, it's not something where it's like, oh, you're going to sign up for Bhakti. Okay, good. Well, in order to be connected to God, you've got to give up 10 things right away. I found that there's so much room in accommodation in Bhakti to very gradually let the things that aren't healthy for us fall off in their own time. So that's, I don't know if I'm articulating myself very clearly, but does that make sense, Loka and Vidarbha?
Perfect sense, yeah.
I really like the way you put it, how not making a statement and maintaining our friendly relationships with everybody. I think that's the key, is we may not be able to relate or associate with them in the same way, but not letting go of the friendly relationship.
Because I also find that, it's so true, like even friends from college, and, we may not have so many things in common anymore, but when we keep those friendships and those relationships alive, then I often find that, they, at a different point, I found that all those relationships have actually changed, because they have some question, or there's something they're going through and they really need to talk to someone. And I find that inevitably, it sort of merges again.
If you keep the channel open, then you'll have that relationship again with them.
Just like day before yesterday, I had a friend that I knew her from preschool. And we were together, and, we used to kind of, like always, for, like when you're kids, right? She's my best friend. And, I would say she's my best friend. And we just kind of, like, life took us in different directions. And now she lives in New York. And, just wanted to invite her because life has been tough with Corona and so many things. And so she came to the program. And so, it's like, you just don't know, like, just keeping that going at some level and not being judgmental. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of being on a spiritual path, is that it's perhaps easy for us to, get in this whole judgmental mindset. But, Bhakti is actually not about, judging others, and having that sort of open-heartedness. In fact, the very word Mahatma, which is a word that Krishna uses, means to be broad-minded. And this is actually one of the hallmark of a devotee, is that a devotee can accommodate, different people with their different backgrounds, and be able to still connect and share and
develop that loving relationship despite that person not practicing Bhakti. I think we have seen that in our own teacher. He could sit with a teenager, maybe who was on drugs, and spend 2 hours having a very friendly and loving talk with them about football and sports or whatever else they're doing, and not really feeling any gap between them.
And in fact, that's a good point, because and then we were told that later, as this teenager was walking away, he thought, maybe I could make some changes in my life. So just just that encouragement. And again, Vaisheshika Prabhu uses such a beautiful, he has a way of putting everything in like aphorisms, like sutras. So he says, fan the spark, right? So that whole idea that, we see that every single person has a spark, the divine spark. And, as long as we respect that spark and we try to encourage everyone, then, that's all.
Thank you so much. This has been so helpful, and I'm feeling very encouraged myself. And I think we're just about out of time, but I wonder if you could share any resources that you have, or maybe where people can learn a bit more about this.
I mean, there's one great book that really we love reading. There's a book called Science of Self-Realization that it's presented in a very question and answer format, Q&A format. And
the Bhagavad Gita is the classic, right? So and there are, like we mentioned, there are communities. There are right now, especially with the pandemic, there are a lot of Zoom sessions going on, and so people can try and find something that resonates with them. We also offer sessions weekday evenings. So there are variety of ways that one can connect. I think reading is good, chanting is good. And I don't know if there are, acyuta-bhava, if you have any.
I'm going to put something up on the screen so you can all see it. So A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Prabhupada was the monk from India who I think was it at the age of 69?
Yes.
He came in 1965. Is that right?
Yeah. 65, yes.
He came in 1965 during the, kind of peak of the counterculture movement and Vietnam War and a lot of things that were happening, especially in the United States. And he brought, as was happening in the West, that many yogis of different types of yoga were kind of coming over to the West and making an appearance. And he was really the first to bring bhakti. And during that time, he started teaching the Bhagavad Gita, the Lower East Side of New York, and for a long time, over a decade, he was tirelessly translating into English the huge, collection of traditional bhakti wisdom literature, as well as writing his own books. And one of the practices of bhakti, in addition to chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, which he taught, this is going back hundreds of years in India, was to distribute the transcendental literature to other people, and oftentimes in singing and dancing parties. So you see, if you remember, the images from the 60s of young people who were taking to yoga, singing and dancing and distributing Bhagavad Gitas and blessed food and things like that. So anyway, this book, The Science of Self-Realization, is one of his books. And this is also, for those of you who might have seen this in pop culture too, this was the guru who had a very deep impact on the life of George Harrison from the Beatles. And so, and he one of the ways he got famous was also through speaking and teaching people the mantra at a Grateful Dead concert in San Francisco. So he was a really prolific writer and translator. And this is a really great starting point, but you can check out his translation of the Bhagavad Gita and many others. And Loka and Vidarbha host Gita classes, and I have promoted those through my Bhakti newsletter. So I'm going to teach you in just a second how to sign up for that, or show you how to sign up for that, I should say. And then the other place that I would point you to is called Bhakti Community. This is a website that my Guru Dev, who you've heard mentioned a few times, Vaisheshika Maharaj, it's kind of one of his projects that come through a number of his disciples and so forth. And I'm going to see if I can bring up Fan the Spark as well. Okay, here we go. So this is another website where you can learn more about Bhakti community and small groups that might be near you and things like that. So fanthespark.org is another good place to get tuned in. Now, if you go to my website, you're also going to see a Bhakti tab right here. And if you click on the Bhakti tab, it'll take you to a screen that says Access Private Bhakti Talks. And you can sign up with your email address. And there's a little video giving a little overview of Bhakti, not nearly as good as this one from Loka and Vidarbha, but just a little overview. And there's probably right now, I'd say at least 50 or 60 talks on Bhakti Yoga that are collected here and archived. You sign up, you get a password for free in the email. You're put on a newsletter that will give you updates when a new video is posted. This video that we're doing today will be a part of that. I just did an interview just yesterday with a devotee named Bojadev Prabhu, and he actually took me through a story of how he came to Bhakti Yoga in Hawaii when he was a kid, and then as an adult, he actually was a survivor of a terrorist attack on a sort of a temple festival gathering in India, and he survived it and talked about how that really transformed his life and his relationship to God and Bhakti Yoga in this very powerful way. So that's another, just a sample of all the really cool stuff that you can find on this private Bhakti channel. And it's my hope that Loka and Vidarbha will join me. Maybe we can get together once a month and field some of your Q&A, because you can always email me info@nightlightastrology.com and just put Bhakti Q&A in the subject line, and then ask whatever questions you have. And I will I'll do my best to try to answer them, but more than likely I'll also invite, Loka and Vidarbha back to help me. So I'd really look forward to hearing from you guys though. So those are some ways that you can stay in touch. And in my newsletter, in the Bhakti newsletter, you're also going to get all of the announcements from Loka and Vidarbha's online classes that they teach and things that they're doing, so you can easily connect with them if you want to be in their classes. I've had a number of, students and people who, my clients and viewers and stuff like that, who have tuned into their Gita classes before and really enjoyed them. So hopefully that gives everyone a lot to choose from. Anything else that you guys want to mention?
No, this is wonderful, and thank you so much for thinking of us and giving us an opportunity to share and hear these wonderful questions. Thank you, Kat, so much. It's been such a pleasure. Yeah, so wonderful meeting with you.
I'd also love, Vidarbha, maybe sometime we can set up your camera and do some very basic seasonal, Ayurvedic cooking tips or something like that, because my wife will come on and do things with herbal medicine. And so we'd love to have you do some stuff with Ayurveda as well, because that's another specialty of Vidarbha's.
Yeah, I would love that. Yeah,
and
definitely.
her singing too. She sings very well, Kirtan.
Yeah, for sure. There's and I think we can link in a newsletter we'll try to this week to your Facebook page, so that if people want to tune in live to your classes, which include kirtan and things like that, they could probably do that too. Yeah. Then Kat's going to keep aggregating questions that come in from the YouTube channel. So Kat, I'm sure, would love to join us and do this. And I know Kat has questions that come up that she adds to the list that are her own as well. So
yeah, so it's a nice little bonus.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody so much for watching. Thank you so much, Loka and Vidarbha, for being here, and I hope that you all are all able to get something really good out of hearing more about Bhakti Yoga. And if you guys have, like I said, any questions, feel free to email info@nightlightastrology.com. And that's what we've got for today. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.